All right. Well, we seem to have had a crash there with the archive, and we will figure out what happened to the first half there in a little while. But we're going to pick up where we left off, discussing our new game for week three, Palace of Renthalion. And what I was in the middle of explaining before I was so rudely crashed, was the fact that this game, the audio for the music system for this game is represented in four wave files, and those wave files uh, coincide or correlate with four different doorways in the game, correspond with four different doorways and the player has the chance of walking out of any one of these doorways and turning on the music is representing that particular part of the game. So if I hit E, now let's see if this here, music will start playing and fade in over time. I'm going to go back here and turn this down just a little bit. But hopefully I can still hear my microphone, but I'll keep turning them on and off. All right. So the player can walk out any one of these doorways and turn on the piece of music, and the music stays or continuously plays through the entire 16 bars and then loops around and will play as long as it needs to until the player walks back out here and hits the E key on their keyboard again and turns it off. And you can visualize it or see it with the torches. The torches turn on and off. Now, I can walk out any of the other doorways, turn on another piece of music. Seems to be glitching also. And I can continually turn on and off any of these pieces of music. I'll just go around turning them on. All right. So each time that I turn on or press the E key on my keyboard, it fades in the piece of music over 3 seconds. And the player has the opportunity of turning on any one of these four pieces of music at any time in the game. I'm sorry, I don't really understand where the glitching and the stuttering is coming from. It's probably Soundflower that's giving me troubles. Um, so since the player can turn on and off any one of the four different pieces of music at any time, they need to be able to play in sync. Notice that whenever I turned on a new piece of music, that it always came in on beat, in time, in sync with whatever the previous pieces of music that play. Something else to notice is that when I fade in and fade out at different times, it doesn't restart the music. It is constantly, it's not starting and stopping the music, it is muting it and unmuting it at different places over time. So if I turn it on and then fade it out again, it doesn't play or start at the beginning point again when I turn it back on. It comes in at a different time. So what that means is all 4 pieces of music are constantly playing from when the game starts. And when the player exits and turns on and off the piece of music, hits the E key on their keyboard, all it's doing is fading up and down from 0 or negative infinity to unity. So you have to write music that has the possibility of up to 4 pieces of music playing together and staying in sync. After a while here, we'll come back and describe what each of the style and the genre and the approach and the overall theme of what each of the different doorways, what each piece of music requires. But let me switch over to, let's see, let's get out of here. Let's minimize this. Hopefully this will work for us, or continue to work for us. And here, these are the 4 tracks that we just heard. So let's see if I bring my output up and... Right, so these are the 4 pieces of music that we were just listening to in the game. And as I mentioned, there were 4 wave files. Ultimately, what you will be creating for this particular project is 4 wave files. They're either 16 bars or 32 bars long. All 4 of them need to start at the same time and end at the same time so that they can loop and stay in sync together. When the game starts, it starts all 4 wave files playing together in sync and plays all... Oops, excuse me. Is it going to glitch? Give me troubles here. It will play all the way through until the end of the 16 bars and then loop back to the front, play all the way through and loop back to the front. So they need to all be the same length so that they play together. If they were, let's do this. If they happen to be different lengths, right? So if you happen to build music that you didn't really pay attention to keeping them in sync or in the same tempo, and they all ended up being different lengths, when the game loops, it will, there's one of 2 ways that it could play. It would play through the files, and one by one, as they ended, it would stop playing them, and you would only hear one at a time, each of the cues stopping until the last one, and it would go until the length of the last or the longest file and loop back through, back to the top. And then one by one, they would stop and go to silence, and then it would loop back around. So the other way that it could mess up is that they actually start looping, and they all will loop farther and farther and get farther out of sync from one to the next one and cause more and more issues overall. So either which way, those different games, different music systems can actually have different types of issues overall. So you want to avoid that. You want to make sure that they are not, or that they're all the same lengths, so that when they loop together, they always stay in sync. All right, so the 4 different cues, earth, wind, fire, and water. Let's go through and listen to them one at a time. Now, the earth cue, when you walk out that doorway and turn turn on that piece of music. This is supposed to represent the hero and the hero's journey. It is basically the start of the game, start of the adventure. Everything is positive, heroic. Your hero is setting off on the start of their quest, and they hopefully are going to find good and good fortune and fame from it. They haven't really encountered anything negative, so everything is probably very positive, very in a major key, can be very peppy and upbeat, should be pretty small instrumentation overall. I typically picture this as a group of performers playing handheld instruments. You think of a game set in a Renaissance period or an old world kind of feel to it, that they would be a group of bards or entertainers or that sing the local entertainers that sing the rejoices of the local town hero. And so flutes work very well, so small woodwinds. Instead of, I would hedge against using any sort of ensembles. Go for solo instrumentation. Instead of a string section, go for a fiddle. Instead of a huge brass section, you could go for a single trumpet, or woodwinds work. Plucked instruments like a lute or a harp, small handheld instrumentation works very well for this earth cue. Then we'll jump to the wind cue. Now, notice that when I bring in the new piece of music, at any point, man, it's really glitching up a storm here. At any point, it will stay in sync, and it will fade in and out. I can fade in the earth again, fade that one out, and it always stays in sync because it's written in the same tempo. All four of these follow a similar progression, a harmonic progression, chord progression that defines the foundation of all four of the chords. The tempo, the percussion patterns all have to fit together. The main thing that you want to avoid in this composition is clashing notes or clashing rhythms. So find a similar key, go from major to the relative minor, and work in a common place and common tonality so that everything is going to fit together. So you have similar key, similar percussion, similar chord progression or harmonic progression, and that means that each cue, how are you going to make it sound more unique if everything needs to kind of revolve around a similar center? Your choice of instrumentation and your use of melody is really going to define each cue and making it sound unique. So the earth cue is much more about lighter, smaller kind of typically more up-tempo, bouncier, staccato, arpeggiated progressions, while the wind cue represents the enemy and the danger that is out there in the world or in the adventure. Now, the player hasn't encountered or battled with the enemy yet. Battled with the enemy yet, so that there is this is not the action yet. There is a sense of stealth, there's a sense of danger, there's a sense of foreboding coming to what is on the horizon right before the enemy right before the player engages with the enemy. So a lot of darker tones, more bass, more low end, longer sustains parts for this wind cue, low cellos, bass, brass, horns, work very well for this a little bit of lighter percussion, and then often a little bit of kind of sparkly high-end instrumentation peppered on top. The fire cue. The fire cue represents the action, it represents the actual battle. This is the point where you can no longer hide from the enemy. Eventually there is going to be action, there's going to be a battle in the game. So the fire, it represents the biggest and loudest and strongest cue. It should have lots of percussion, lots of energy from big brass and string ensembles. Basically throw the full orchestra at it. Big timpanis, rolling snare drums, big crash cymbals, lots of energy from the fire cue. The last one is the water cue, and the water cue represents the emotional twists and turns and ups and downs in the game. Basically, you can go one of two approaches, one of two directions. You can either go in a happy, positive, emotional direction where it represents everything that is good and happy and positive in the game world, represents love and family and winning, and you saved the town, and you slayed the dragon, and it's defeating the enemy and everything that is winning and positive. Or you can go down the negative approach, where it represents loss and longing and death and the end and negativity and heartbreak, and basically either which way that you go represents or you're attempting to pull at the emotional heartstrings of the player. So whatever it is, it typically has a very strong emotional melodic or melodic lead line, whether that's a string or a piano or a harp or some woodwind. It's typically lighter instrumentation. Choirs can work quite well also. But when you bring all four of these in together, remember when the player walks out of the door, they press the E key on their keyboard, and really all the game does is fade from negative infinity up to unity. If they press E again on their keyboard, it fades it back down, and it's just constantly going in the background through the game. That's how it keeps sync and allows it to play all together. So the player has the ability of introducing all four of them at the same time, and it still has to make sense. Nothing should get really lost in the mix. You should be able to focus on any one of the four of them and still be able to pick out all of the individual melodies and the real main focus of each one of the cues. So choosing a key and the overall chord progression that all of this will revolve around, and then writing out four different melodies for each one of the cues, and then determining the instrumentation that each one of these cues will take. Let's listen to another example here. We'll start with the earth cue. switching is even affecting the pitch. That's interesting. Anyway, so I like this one because it has a really strong lead trumpet line there, very heroic kind of feel. The instrumentation is a little bit big. Like I said, I would kind of shy away from ensembles, but melodically it works quite well. We'll bring in the wind cue now. So there's a little bit of melody in there. There's a lot of low end, and that might not transfer too well in the broadcast. But again, it follows the same tonal center. Each one has unique instrumentation and melodic content. Fire cue has strong percussion, strong brass. There's a chant in there also. Just power and energy from the fire cue. And then the water cue has a really strong emotional lead line from the string violin. Now, when all four of them play, it can definitely start. There's an issue of it starting to sound cluttered. So, working on EQs to kind of carve out a different area for each one of your instruments to sit in, determine which one is the lead and the main focus of each one of the cues, and really kind of put a spotlight on that as it mixes together in the main cue, mixes together for the final mix. But you want to make sure that all four of these files, when you bounce them out and they're played back at unity, that is the overall level that you want on your meter. So we have two different examples there. Two different examples I want to also discuss. Also discuss an approach to actually building this composition. When going and building a piece of music for this type of composition, it is best to figure out the main progression first and build around that. We will talk a bit about a top-down approach to building the music, but I do want to load up a session here that has some ideas of setting and starting out with this session. This right here. Don't close. So, when starting out this composition, one of the most challenging aspects is that you will very quickly run out of choices and options when writing each new instrument line. We are going to talk about an approach called top-down composition and kind of compare it or contrast it against what is probably a way more common approach of creating music, which could be known as bottom-up composition. So typically when creating music, most of the time, a lot of people approach, and this is a very common and very viable way of creating music. A bottom-up approach is starting out with a few instruments and building with more and more instrument layers until you create more of a song, and then start building out your song structure. But a lot of folks will start with your drums, kick, snare, and hi-hat, write out a kick drum pattern, add a bass line on top of that, add a keyboard line, add guitars or strings, start adding strings or brass or winds, or adding in trumpets or vocals, background vocals, and just basically write and compose and build a beat or build a song layer by layer, adding each new idea in while listening to all of the previous ones. And so each new line that you write requires that it fits with all of the previous pieces of or tracks that you've written so far. And when you're doing a composition for a large number of instruments, it can be very easy to run out of ideas and options, where you are either playing through the same line or copying or playing very similar patterns on different instruments, or you're running into a lot of clashes and dissonance. So you can, what I often term as musically paint yourself into a corner, where if you start out and you are going to write this piece of music and you need earth, wind, fire, and water cues, and you're going to start out with strings. And so you write a cello line, and then on top of that you write a viola line against that cello, and then you're going to add in French horns, and then you add in an oboe, and then you add in a violin part, a viola part. With each new instrument that you add in, you have to make sure that it works with all of the other notes and all of the other instrument lines that you've written from each of those previous instruments. And there are only so many notes in the key. There are only so many rhythmic subdivisions, going from whole notes to half to quarter to eighths and so on. So it can be very easily that you start running out of ideas or options. You either start doing the same thing over and over again, or you things start clashing and not working. So a suggestion instead is to start out with, don't worry about the instrumentation. Don't worry about what instrument is going to play what notes. Focus on the instrumentation and the orchestration separately than the composition. The most challenging part of this project is the composition, making sure that the notes don't clash rhythmically or melodically. So start out, doesn't matter what instrument it is, a very blank general instrument. A good instrument to start out with is a piano. Write your chord progression, and then write your 4 melodies that work with that chord progression, that represent each of the 4 cues that you will build. You will build an earth cue, wind, fire, and water. Each of them have unique instrumentation and unique melody. So start out with the melody. Let me see if how well this session is set up. Let me unmute all of these and start here. Let's start with this one. Okay, so I started out by just writing the chord progression that I will follow through the rest of the composition. And I know that if all of these instruments, as long as whatever line I write, I'm going to follow a common tempo and a common key, but whatever line I write follows this chord progression, I'm going to be pretty safe, right? I'll be 90% of the way there. Every once in a while there'll be still issues, but as long as I have a good starting point, I can work from there. Then, so all 4 of these are going to follow that, but each one of them will have its own unique melody line. So I'm going to start with the earth here and introduce the melody. Now, that melody line is eventually it's not going to be played by a piano. I don't think the piano doesn't actually show up in any of the rest of this instrumentation, but that's where I started out. Alright, so now with that progression set up, I started moving this over to the earth cue. So let me go over here, and I'm going to mute all of these out and bring in the earth cue. And alright, let me bring in the piccolos. Take out the piano. So eventually, the piccolos took the melody, the flutes, and the guitar. Took more. Let me take out the piano here. Bring in the fiddle and the percussion. So that's eventually, it's not completely mixed, but that is at least the instrumentation and progression for the earth cue. Following the core, piano part, and melody here. Now, when you move from the piano over to like a, let's say a piccolo, it's not going to be a one-to-one copy. It's pretty darn close, but I'm going to need to massage the notation a little bit, or the piano roll, and the velocity and the progression of it. So, but at least the notation or the progression is correct. You're 90% of the way there. So here is the wind cue. So that turned into an oboe. Oh wait, I gotta go. Let's see. Do this, make those out, turn this up. And turned into an oboe line and bassoon. Had the harp in there. Violin pizzicatos. And tuba for the bass. And the piano back in. Here's the fire. Now the fire cue is going to be much more percussion. There is a bit melody in there, but it's all about the power and the energy of it. So let's see. I think it's on the French horns and trumpets. Violins, cellos, basses, trombones, tubas, snares, percussion. And the last one here, the water cue. Turns into, I think I took the piano part, put it to the harpsichord. Cellos, pizzicatos, violins, choir, flute. Oops, I lost my loop. So, hopefully that gives you some ideas of how to approach this composition. Start out with just a piano part, write the overall progression, write the different melodies, and then start worrying about instrumentation. You'll have, once you have the composition, you are a large way in the good direction of getting the project accomplished, because then you just take the different notes, the different voicing of the chords and the melodies that you create, and start orchestrating that across, figuring out which instrument takes which voice and plays which notes. All right. Now, there's a lot of instruments in here. There's a lot of things going on. We have our production technique, the other assignment that you will be doing, and you should probably actually complete this assignment first before working on the game composition, because they work well together. You will be creating a template, a logic template using Contact to get access to a whole bunch of quality instrumentation. So one of the major drawbacks that we found to this composition from student submissions was the quality of the instrumentation. Separate from the actual composition, really what was lacking was proper use of the instrument sample libraries, use of common articulations, and use of velocity, editing, and proper kind of approach to it beyond just inputting the notes to get a quality overall project and composition. So the production technique will have you building a template that gives you very quick access to a lot of different articulations and a lot of sounds very quickly. So I have somewhere, let's see here. Wanted to wait before I opened up this session. It looks like this. Now, you have a total of 56 tracks in this session. And that is 14 different instruments, each with 4 different articulations. And it is going through and setting up all of these tracks, naming them and routing them properly, which can be a bit tedious, but that's kind of the point of a template, is you set it all up once, save it so that you don't ever have to set it up again, and you can reutilize it over and over again. Eventually having different templates, maybe for recording session, a mixing session, a sound design session, a voiceover session, a composition for orchestral and rock and hip hop and electronic, and just having different templates to get you started to make the workflow much faster overall. So we have our different instruments set up here. We have our woodwind section, piccolos, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoon, contrabassoon. We have our brass section, French horn, trumpet, trombone, tuba. And we have the string section, violin, viola, cello, and double bass. And each one of them has 4 different articulations. Common ones, most commonly you'll see sustain and staccato, also forte piano and sforzando. Once we get down into the strings, you get, oh, look at that. You get tremolo and pizzicato articulations in there. So what this allows you to do is very quickly arm the track that you want and get the correct articulation. You will have contact set up so that it has 4 of the same instruments in it. So if I'll do it this way. Hello, contact. You're going to wake up here? You're just going to spin. Oh no. Don't really die on me. Well. Oh. That was no good. Let's try that again. Maybe those other ones loaded. We'll blame it on that. All right, let's try that again. Go into contact. Don't crash, don't, thank you. And you are going to load up 4 instances of the same instrument. Piccolo. Oh no. Don't you do that to me. Okay. Oh. What is wrong with you, contact? I'm not liking what you're doing. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm just going to avoid that step. I'm just not going to do that. Because logic would prefer that I did not. One more time. Okay, so trust me, you are going to go into contact here, and you will load up 4 different instances of that piccolo. And by doing that, you will allow you to route 4 different MIDI channels into that those 4 different instances of that piccolo instrument, and give you access to 4 different articulations. By loading up the 4, it doesn't load up 4 times the samples. One very cool thing that Contact does is it only loads up 1 instance of all of the samples and then reuses them for as many different instruments as you have that use those samples. And then the other question here is often people use key switching to give you very quick access to different articulations. And by setting it up this way, where you are routing 4 different instances of the instruments, gives you the ability to just arm a channel to get access to that articulation. The other thing is you can layer articulations and hear them together, so you might get a bit of the strong staccato start or attack and a longer sustain. So you will set up all of these different tracks. You will also get into the mixer and route the different tracks together. So we have piccolo, flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, contrabassoon, all of the woodwinds. We have French horn, trumpet, trombone, tuba for all the brass. Then we have violin, viola, cello, and double bass. We also have masters. We have a winds master, a brass master, and a strings master. And those accept inputs on bus 1, 2, and 3. So all of your woodwinds goes to bus 1 to go to that woodwinds master. All of your brass goes to bus 2 to go to that brass master. And as you might expect, bus 3 goes to the strings master, so violin, viola, cello, and double bass go into one master input. By doing this, this allows you individual control of each one of the instruments. This also allows you group control. There is a EQ and compressor on every single channel, but they're turned off. And you can also affect things on the masters. Then bus 4, all of the channels get bus 4, which is a reverb. Goes to a reverb channel, has Space Designer, also the EQ and a compressor on it. And then all of the masters and the reverbs, they go out of the stereo outputs so that you can hear it. So setting up this session allows you very quick and easy access to a lot of good instrumentation. It's probably a good idea that you create this template first before you do the game composition, so that you have material or a session to start from. Gives you all the tracks and all the routing that you need. There is a PDF along with this assignment that's got a whole bunch of slides in how to actually load and save and build this template. So that should give you good instructions. You can run out of memory because you are loading up a lot of different instruments. So you want to make sure that you load or clear out each one of the instances of contact and save a preset. So notice that when I load this up, they're all blank. So the session actually loads up very, very quickly. And it's not until I actually need the piccolos that I can go ahead and go to File, Load, and I could load up any one of my presets that I have. So when you build a particular setup, we won't insert these piccolos because it seemed to be crashing there, but when you do that, you can save multi-as, and that will save a preset or the setup of all of the individual different instances of instruments in Contact to make it all work. So go ahead and set up that session, set up that template, and that will give you a good place to start as you are starting out your game composition. All right, so those are your 2 assignments for this week. Here's the grade sheet for that assignment. Delivery for the session exists. You provide the logic session. That is the template. You provide the 14 presets because you have 14 different instruments. So you'll create 14 different Contact presets. And then you'll take screenshots of each one of the sections. All right, so those are your new assignments for week 3. What we want to do here is go back and take a listen to some examples from week 2. Close that out. There's that other session. I lost my session here. Hold on. I think because it crashed, I have to rebuild it. So that's simple enough. Right, we had 4 submissions. And those 4 submissions, hold on, let me organize it over here. Let's see. Yes. Right here. All right. Oops. All right. Save that before it crashes on me again. Okay, let's see here. So, I have 4 submissions here from last week from AngryBots. Let's take a look at the grade sheet for AngryBots so that we have a couple of things to talk about. Online week 2 AngryBots grade sheet. No. Try again. No. Week 2 AngryBots. There we go. Okay. So, we have similar categories to last week. Consistency, instrumentation, ambient action, looping, development, mix, formatting, delivery, screenshots. Some of these break down into technical categories. Others are more of the creative side of things. Consistency is how do we transition between ambient and action? Similar instrumentation, similar key and tempo elements to make it feel like it comes from one whole consistent song. Instrumentation, the game has a much more darker and grittier feel, much more modern production style, much probably a more electronic or harder edged aggressive instrumentation overall. Then ambient and action. Ambient needs to develop and have interesting textures and use of musical instruments in unique ways that change and evolve over time. The action is all about the robots attacking. They are 8 bars long. They're very much high energy, strong instrumentation as the battle happens. Looping files, then we want to make sure that there are no pops or clicks or issues with the loop. Development, avoiding repetition, making sure that you develop your ideas, don't just stay in the same place throughout the minute-long ambient queue and even the 8-bar long action queues. Then the rest of these are common between all of our assignments. The mix overall, mix since they're typically louder, stronger, more aggressive instrumentation, it kind of makes it a little more lenient and fluctuating overall, and what defines as a solid mix, but strong and loud and powerful is really what is necessary to work in this game. Then the formatting of the files, delivery of the files, and screenshot, and you deliver a video directly with the assignment. So those are the types of things that we are looking for. Let me separate this out here so we get a little bit more room. We've got all of the stinger cues. Let's do this. Remember, the stingers play immediately with the action cues. They need loud and strong. They need to hit hard and fade out of the way pretty quickly. Here's the action cues. 3. Okay. All right. And these are all the ambients. Ambient cues, action cues, and stinger files. So we'll start out with the ambient cues here. All 3 of these look like they are set up pretty well. Strong levels on each one of them, so nothing's going to be too low or lost in the mix. The ambient cues, the first one here and the fourth one here, they both fade in pretty strongly, obviously, and then they end kind of also pretty strong, so they get cut off here at the end. Notice how they fade in. The other 2 kind of look like they might do it also, so you want to make sure that the ends tie together seamlessly. But other than that, that's just visually taking a look at it. The action cues here, each one of these look like they have a loud, strong volume, which works very well for the cue. They look like they're at least visually set up to loop, so those look fine. And the stinger cues need to have a strong impact at the front and fade out to silence pretty quickly. So these look like they all get cut off. These look like they fade out to silence correctly, although this one looks like it fades in. The other ones have a pretty strong attack, so you got to watch out for the fade ins. These look like they get cut off, and these look like they get cut off. So we'll take a listen to all of those also. But those are just quick things without even listening to it, just visually, some of the things we can identify. And now let's listen to them one at a time and see how it sounds. All right. Solid instrumentation so far. The only thing I might notice is that it kind of fades in almost like a song, like one instrument at a time coming in. Now the beats come in. Like this is where you want to be for most of the loop. Now it kind of comes. Whoops. Oh, man. Almost sounds too much like a song with melody and a structure and a form to it. It needs to kind of lose the player too much. You can really identify where you are in the song. So let's listen to the loop here. Kind of has died back down. Now the beat goes away. Now it'll probably just get cut off here. Oh, well, helps if I loop it. Yeah. Okay, so the main thing to work with, the overall idea and the instrumentation works well, and when you're here, maybe it's before the solo. The solo also and the trumpet line really kind of lend to that feeling of a song. So you want to lose structure, you want to lose really obvious melodic development or lead melodies, and focus more on the changes and development of the cue. You want to really lose the player in the music so they don't know when it loops around. Let's jump over to the action cues. Now this doesn't sound different enough from the biggest part of the ambient cue. If that went into this, you really wouldn't feel a strong change. So the action cues need to be bigger and louder and faster and stronger. Yeah, these just feel like kind of part A, part B of another song. And some of that is that laid back groove. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like it feels like a little too laid back than robots chasing you around with lasers and rocket launchers. These two sound too similar to each other. Watch the repetition. A lot more development, a lot more change. It needs to have a more striking difference between the ambience and the action cues. Let's jump over to three stingers. All right, these two sound too similar to each other. You could maybe kind of get away with this one if it had like a kick, a stronger impact at the front, and also they need to fade out to silence and not fade in. So a stronger attack on each one of them to help hide that transition from the main loops. All right, let's try the next one here. Let's do this. Loop. All right, next one. By this point, it's a little too sparse. You got the low pad, the drone below, you've got an organ, you got a synth on top, use some more instrument layers, bass line, maybe a little percussion. Need more changes. The looped worked very well, but like this part doesn't sound too very different from this part over here. Add and change instrumentation through the cue. Move to different chord variants. Add more bass line. Yeah, add a bass line in there to add some energy and changes, and maybe a little percussion. Let's try the action cues. Okay, good change in the energy. All right, you have a strong lead melody there. Good variation of the drums. The percussion is a little bit buried. Percussion is a little bit buried in the mix. And maybe bring in a little bit more low-end bass line in there. Let's try the spider cue. Yeah, with the combination of the lead synth is the same in each cue, so either change up the lead synth a bit from one cue to the next, or bring up more of the other instrumentation, like the drums, more variation in the percussion, so that it gives a little bit more change from one to the next. So that you can tell which robot's coming after you, which robot's coming after you. All right, and 3 ending cues here. All right, these feel pretty separate from the main cues. They feel like little riffs. You got to avoid anything that has rhythmic kind of a pattern to it, because that might clash. Anything really tonal, that interval might clash. Oops, it might clash with some of the instrumentation. Watch for anything that fades in. Needs to have a strong hit. Each one of these could definitely use like a kick drum or an impact at the front of the cues. So a bit more variation between the action cues, a bit more change in development through the ambient cue. All right. Try our next ambient loop. I like the instrumentation, kind of the power. There does seem to be a lot that's kind of lost in the mix. Feels very low mids to low. A lot of energy in there. Feels like there's some compression holding it back. The drum feels way buried in the mix. I like the pads. I like the cool tones and pads that are on top. Watch that loop. It's a real sudden loop. But watch out for a lot of low end fed in compressor. Feels like there's maybe one compressor. It feels like there's one compressor over the whole mix that really needs to push through. Here in the chat, is there any way we can go over it in class? Absolutely. DeMarcus, if I don't, I'll jump to yours after we get to this last one here. So watch out, yeah, and maybe some more instrumentation in the higher registers or higher octaves to kind of balance that low end. Let's try out with our first action cue. Whoa, okay. This is more sound designy than rhythm. I need drums and bass and rhythm. Yeah, these are much more atmospheric than musical. So each cue does need a melody and harmony and drums and bass. I mean, these could be interesting layers in the cue, but with strong rhythms pounding away. Interesting overall sounds, though. That would work for more of the sound design aspects coming up for this assignment. And then 3 stingers. All right, so let's do those quick. Let me do this one at a time. So this would work well. It needs to have a stronger impact, maybe a kick or an impact sound at the front. Make sure it fades out to silence. If it needs to be longer, that's fine. A bit louder overall. Don't fade in. That's kind of cool, but you need to have some sort of strong attack at the front. and this just gets cut off. This is kind of too short. So watch out for some of that. Yeah, this is going to be the biggest challenge overall. This is going to need a full, you're going to need 3 8-bar musical loops there. All right, let's take this one out and hide that away. And while I'm thinking about it, let's do this. Here. Yep. Oh, no, I need to go get it. Oh, that means I need to get it. Hold on. R. All right, that's going to start downloading, so that should be ready to go when we're done here. Okay, ambient loop. All right, a cool pad to start with. Going to need to hear some changes and new instrumentation over the course of it. So certainly by this point, definitely need stronger changes overall. The pad develops and changes, but more instrumentation or more obvious changes and obvious additions of new instruments. Maybe a little bit of percussion in there to help a bit of the pacing overall. This is definitely a good layer, but it needs additional elements added to it. Let's just check how it loops. Yeah, watch that loop. It really cuts off pretty hard. Cuts off pretty hard and starts over again. So definitely need more change and development through the cue. Give some more variation. Add more instrument layers. Watch the loop. All right, action cue. Need more layers there. Good percussion through here. All right, so the percussion works through each one of the cues, but then the rest of the instrumentation gets a bit repetitive, needs more instrument layers, needs a stronger melody. This one feels like it mainly is alternating between 2 chords. Could really use a strong lead melodic line. The mech here is dominated by percussion and a pad and some additional Also, this mech gets cut off. It's not enough bars overall. More additional instrumentation. You have a bit of the energy from the drums, but the rest of the instrumentation could help the power overall. Let's listen to 3 stingers. There's a lot of low end on this one. So they're good elements, but they still need a couple of more layers added to them. This is mainly a pad, needs to fade out to silent, needs to have a strong attack. This is mainly just a lead or a kind of a filtered synth, also needs an attack there, gets cut off. This is just low end bass and kick. It's almost like you could add these together, get something closer as long as all these things faded out. So strong low end impact with a bit of that synthy modulation on top always helps. It always helps the sting. Always helps the stingers. All right. Our last one has downloaded here. And we'll throw these in. Like that. And 3 stingers, 3 action cues. Mute that, hide that. Do this. Okay. Start with this ambient. All right, the drums work well. Was that a low cello? Cool. So you added another layer here. The strings could come up a little bit, and it is kind of dominated in the lower ranges. Ooh, yeah, all this stuff could actually be introduced earlier into the cue. That's what I'm talking about. The more the higher instrumentation, the higher ranges, that lead synth. Yep. We're missing a few beats there. Let's see. Yeah, it cuts off a bit too soon here in the loop. The other thing is there's all of this synths happening over here that get cut off. So a whole bunch of synths over here that get cut off when it loops. So you gotta make sure to tie it in a bit smoother. So yeah, make sure you're counting, double check the number of bars and beats in this loop overall. Let's jump over here to the action, and I would bring the synths that you have in earlier and then just develop the ideas further through the cue. Action. There's some cool things going on in each one of them. Let me count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2. Only 4-bar loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna guess that maybe had the BPM up twice. Had it set twice to what the actual tempo is. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3. Yep. It feels like if they're 4 bars long, you're probably counting at 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 6. Yeah. So I would double out the lengths of the progressions for each one of those to put them into 8-bar loops. Yeah, like some of the drum patterns really feel like they're sped up twice as fast as they should be. But you have a good energy in each one of them. And let's check out. That works. Cool. I would cut this one. Oops. I would cut this one to this point here, and then crank up the volume a bit. Could probably crank up the volume of each one of these just a bit to fill in some of this gap up here. But each of the stingers, they sound, they work very well. As stingers, they have a strong attack and do fade out to silence, because those are fine. Rebecca, yeah, the only thing is I have to go download them, so hold on just a sec. Let this start. Hello? Alright, there it goes. That should work. Alright. So... yeah, because it starts out relatively sparse here and gets a lot more interesting here in the second half. So I would use that earlier all the way through. Again, did you use a compressor across the stereo mix? It sounds like there is some things fighting for the compressor because you have a lot of low energy from the low pads and the kick drum and the rest of the percussion. And then when all the other instrumentation comes in, feels like that power is kind of fighting against the compressor. So the thing is downloading pretty slowly. The bass and the lead line of this one, this first one here, feels a little bit dissonant. This one works better. I would maybe focus on the lead line of this one a bit more. Right. Let's see here. Looks like I have 3 minutes left. Let's see here. What else? Let me go through all of my tabs here to make sure that I discussed everything. Save that. So we talked about this. we went through this PDF. So next week, you will be doing the sound design for Angry Bots, and you will be doing a final game capture of all 3 of the games, so you can post them up and share them with the class in a class discussion. Kind of a post of all of the projects and the final versions of them, because so far you've submitted versions that had both or just the music in it, and so in the final version you will have music and sound design. Let's see, 1 minute left. Went through all of these. Went through the grade sheet here. What else? We don't need the video anymore. Get a copy of the video along with the game. Oh, game's still running. Close that out. Close this out. Oh, come on. 30 seconds. Let's set up a track here. Oops. There we go. Mute this. Hide this. And no, not yet. There it goes. All right, all done. Zip. And there we go. Right. So, stingers, action cue, ambient cue. Do this, fade that out, make sure these are all actually muted. Yep, okay, ambient cue. So you get a nice progression, nice drum pattern there, nice progression. Could definitely have more instruments that kind of weave their way in and out of the mix that play along with this. There's better changes through the second half over here. A little change in the drums. Might actually keep that pattern going through the whole cue to help the energy or help the pacing of it a bit. So I would mostly additional instrument layers, or maybe even backing off on the lead pad and letting, there's some other kind of like a more plucked kind of a sparklier synth that's back there playing arpeggiated lines. That could maybe come in and out a bit more. It really, the mix kind of sits there once it's established. So having things change a bit, either new instrumentation or what's there kind of fading in and out. Let's go to the action cues. Cool. Nice low end bass. Good energy from the, good drum pattern. So each cue has a good like separation of the instrumentation or new unique instruments that give a kind of unique theme to it. There's a lot of good low end in there. It sometimes feels like it dominates a bit in the mix. I don't know if it's just my headphones or how I'm listening to it right now. But I like the drum, the pattern through the mech cue and that kind of double time feel compared to this, where your kick and your snare is kind of at a halftime feel in a comparison. Same thing with the spider. So maybe something like a hi-hat or some other element that is at that faster kind of double time feel between those to help that energy. Yeah, good instrumentation overall, solid progressions, maybe a little bit more variation. You don't want to repeat the same phrase in the first half and second half. Then let's go over to 3 stingers. These look like they're set up correctly. They hit hard and fade out. Cool. They all 3 work. I might watch out just a little bit for the, I don't even say melody, the little phrase that you hit through this stinger. You want to make sure that that works on all 3 of the cues. So I'll just set this up. Just drag. Do something like this. Yeah, these are really strong, so it's kind of hard for these to stick out. Let's take this down just a little bit. Yeah, you want to make sure that that doesn't clash. Let's try this. I guess I shouldn't have deleted it. I should just move it back. So, yeah, there's a lot of power from the bass in that low end of these cues, so we're going to have to watch out for that in the mix overall. You're going to have to be careful what you do with any compressors on the main outputs overall. All right, here in the chat, sorry, a couple of things. So more upbeat for that and the ambient. Yeah, for the action cues, the percussion could work with a little bit of that kind of more upbeat or double time kind of feel. And I kind of thought a little dissonance would be cool. Yeah. It's something to pay attention to one way or the other. If each one of these has a real strong key or tone to it, that you want to make sure that if it is dissonance, then it is intentional for each one of the cues. So overall, works very well and fits the theme of the cues and the energy of it. So, and across all of them, we saw a whole bunch of different approaches and techniques, things to pay attention to. Everybody, at least the foundation of ambient and action and just moving, ambient and action and 8-bar cues and switching back and forth. The structure of the files everybody got, and very rarely was it that there was a lot of things that needed to be changed. Most of it was tweaking and making it fit in the structure of the game and how things are going to transition and loop overall. So, all right, that is quite a bit from me overall. So good work, everyone. I gave us some good things to listen to. Let's go ahead and wrap it up there. And we will meet again on Wednesday. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around here for a few minutes afterwards and answer any of those. But otherwise, have a good afternoon, and I will see you again on Wednesday. Thanks.